Is it going to work for me now? Oh, okay. I can see the bars on the mic actually going up now. Is it going to work for me now? Oh. Okay. Apologies about that. So, in this workshop, I am going to try and make sure that I am hurrying up. So obviously, we've got a lot to cover. I don't want to take advantage of your time, and I want to make it easy to understand as well. So I wanted to introduce this and use this quote of, I do the same exercises I did 50 years ago and they still work. I eat the same food I ate 50 years ago and it still works, by Arnold Schwarzenegger, because he may do it now, but he really did what like a lot of people did years ago, where they just focused on regular simple exercises and standard nutrition, and a lot of people really overcomplicate that now. So, little introduction to us. We wanted to talk about compound exercises because it's primarily what we do in our gym. It allows you to target more muscles with fewer exercises in your workouts. And we think that working with people in person puts us at a distinct advantage, because you get to learn so much about what people typically do, how they move, what they struggle with. It's you know, we see the same patterns over and over, so we know a lot about what people really need. And I find that a lot of people go to being an online coach or an online personal trainer very quickly before they've actually gained the experience of working with people in person. And a little bit more about us. We have 2 dogs. They're both head cases. One's a husky, potentially a mix, but she won't let us test us because she's afraid of the swab. And Malinois, who's definitely not like a proper working Malinois. She just needs like sports drills and stuff like that and proper training. So part of the reason we opened our gym, as well as wanting to have a space of our own where our clients actually enjoyed it, we wanted to bring our dogs to work with us because we do quite long working days, and this has allowed us to do that. So you're in the right place if you're a busy person who's struggling with your strength training workouts, you're not sure about your exercise selection, and you just keep repeating the same thing over and over. You do the same weight every single week, or you can't or don't know how to make progress with that. And if you're not sure about what you're actually doing, about whether, sorry, I just need to move. And if you're not sure about what you're actually doing aligns with your goals, because all of these things we find from just talking to people, whether that's just a quick phone consultation, doing free fitness audits, sometimes we do them, or when people come into our gym and they tell us what they're currently doing, this seems to be the problems that we see quite a lot. So, lesson 1, introduction to compound exercises. I'm going to put myself back over here, and I'm going to make myself a little bit smaller because you don't need to see a ton of me. So, compound lift, the benefits. A lot of our experience comes from powerlifting and strongman, but most of our clients do general strength training, and they might like go towards a little bit of powerlifting, a little bit of strongman, but it's much more general. And we take influence from powerlifting and strongman because there are processes there that work really well for people, and it just doesn't have to be taken as seriously because they're not in comp prep. But we apply it to our programs with the focus on building strength specifically, and we also heavily layer it with exercises intended for muscle growth and conditioning. So we have such a focus on form and technique, and that's not to say that every powerlifter and every strongman has the most perfect technique, but it's just something that we have really focused on, and we feel like a lot of people don't focus on it enough. So just for clarification, a lot of people get confused with these different types of competitions. So a bodybuilder is someone who's training for aesthetics, specifically muscle mass, and they get really lean for competition. They're the ones who have to heavily fake tan and, you know, look a certain way on stage because they are getting judged on what they look like. Olympic weightlifters, this is typically someone you might say like, oh, you're an Ollie lifter. They're training for two main lifts on the stage, on the platform, the snatch and the clean and jerk. Powerlifters train for three main lifts, back squat, bench press and deadlifts. And strongman athletes can train for so many different lifts and events. It depends on the competition, and it's a mix of strength and endurance. It really is the epitome of strength and endurance here. And so with a lot of people get these confused because some people do compete in multiple ones. So we can see how that happens, but just to clarify, if I mention anything, this is the difference there. So moving on to actual main content of this workshop, what is a compound exercise? It's a multi-joint movement targeting larger muscle groups. So more muscles working together is better results because you're going to be doing more things at once. You're working more muscles at once. It's main building blocks of workouts. We always start our workouts with these exercises and start our clients' workouts with these exercises, and then you do your other stuff. So this is strength focused training specifically. A lot of people think that all weight training is like, okay, I'm building strength, but it's not necessarily the optimal way of doing it. So this is different combination exercises. So say you do like a lunge and a bicep curl at the same time, that would be something I would call a combination exercise, not a compound exercise. So just a word of warning, you need to train with intention and quality movement, not do everything as fast as possible. This is specifically if you want to look at gaining strength and muscle mass, because a lot of people train for just general fitness, which is fine if you want to do that, but if you're looking at getting those strength results, building a bit more muscle mass, you do need to train with intention, and it's not just about like quickly doing stuff. With that, you can improve your fitness level because you're moving and you're working the cardiovascular system a little bit more. But yeah, I'll go into this a little bit more detail another time. Just to compare, an isolation exercise is typically a single joint movement. So a compound exercise, a multi-joint. So there's a lot of exercises where you can target those smaller muscle groups just passively, because it's part of the main compound exercise. So for instance, an isolation movement works the biceps, good for extra bicep development when you have time to fit it in after you've done everything else. Then a compound multi-joint movement, say you're doing a barbell row, bent over row, it's your back, your biceps, your forearms and your trunk. So it covers so many areas, so it doesn't matter as much if you don't get to your accessory work. A lot of people go, oh, I can't fit in all my exercises this week, all my workouts this week. So we're like, okay, let's look at your compounds, let's look at your main strength-based lifts and focus on them. And if you don't get around to doing your tricep extensions, that's fine. It is just the extra layer on top. It should be anyway. So the main benefits of doing this is that it's efficient for your time because you're working more muscles per exercise. Again, so if you need to cut back on time for whatever reason, you can just focus on your main lifts and just add in the extra stuff when you can do it. Equipment efficiency, so you need fewer things. You don't need a whole plethora of sorry, I moved myself over. You don't need a whole plethora of different bits of equipment. You don't need super fancy things. You can just use weights, and this will overall give you better strength, better movement and stability, because a lot of people go like, oh, I just want to move better, I don't want to gain a lot of strength, I don't need to be super strong. It's like, yes, but you have better movement if you're stronger. So you don't need to go to the extremes, but you just need to take influence from it. And better bang for your buck in terms of strength and muscle. So really important thing here is don't make the mistake of half-arsing your way through your exercises. always use your full effort and engage as many muscles as possible. Should have said it that way, because you will see more from each and every exercise if you really put full effort in. If you're just moving through the motions, even with the most, like something that looks really simple, if you're just going through it really easily, you're probably not, yes, you might not be using the right weight, but there's also the matter of not putting enough intention into it and not really focusing on the connection to what you're actually doing. So the ultimate strength-based compound lift, I was actually going to do my workshop initially just on these, and I was like, no, we'll go for broader spectrum here, because not everyone will need to be doing these. So like I mentioned before about powerlifting, like this is your main lifts for that. So you back squat, it's a proper full body engagement when done properly. A lot of people make the mistake of only using their legs, and then they're like crushed by the bar and start shrimping, and it's because they're like chipped forwards a little bit. We don't want that. Then there's bench press. Again, when done properly, it's a full upper body, and use your legs as well. Some people just think it's for your arms. Some people just think it's for your pecs, which is a little bit closer to what it actually is. But when done properly, it's much more of a compound exercise. And then there's your deadlifts. So it's a full posterior chain exercise, and use your legs. You will get your quads involved a little bit more. Posterior chain does include the back of the legs. Some people accidentally, even though they know they should be using their legs, they just haul it up with their back. And that is typically when people go like, oh, deadlifts are so bad for you, pulls at your back. And it's like, you're doing it wrong. It is most of the time when someone's having an issue with an exercise, they're doing it wrong. So, building the foundations. So starting with the basics, we want better quality movement and full body exercise covering all the fundamental movement patterns. You need to stop neglecting the full body, so you can't spot reduce fat, and you can't just rely on training certain areas or what you prefer to train. A lot of people do that. And then there's equipment selection, so start with dumbbells and or machines and gradually work towards barbells. You don't need to go straight to a barbell. Strong foundations build lasting strength. So I always find that the people who started with the basics are better lifters. Some people start to get specialised in certain types of exercise, certain types of training very quickly, and it's far better off that you focus on the general aspect first and then get more specialised. They just typically do better in the long run. They really know how to engage their back, make sure they're not just using brute force to get through an exercise. Lesson 2, understanding training variables. So why training variables matter. Different goals require different approaches. We could look at overlapping things, but it's different. Training success comes from matching variables to those goals. Like I said earlier, a lot of people are accidentally training towards the wrong thing and don't even know it. Program design does affect outcomes. So it's not that multiple people can't use the same program and get results, because you can do the same program as someone else and still get results, but it depends on a few factors, and you should be able to following the same program doesn't mean the exact same weight for everyone. That's not what it means. It shouldn't mean anyway. Training intensity and recovery needs vary based on those variables. So when you're training for strength, that might look different from someone else who is training for even a powerlifting competition. General strength is actually slightly different in terms of programming, including intensity and recovery. And then there's the other side of things where you are looking at more of a muscle response. That's going to be different again, and those things vary. Wanted to highlight, I know a lot of people will say the word toning, and I use it too because I know a lot of people use it, and they go, but I don't want to build muscle, I don't want to get stronger necessarily, but I want to get toned, not build muscle. Getting toned is just building some muscle. That's it. It's building a bit of muscle, typically. But for some people find it very easy to build muscle. Other people find it much harder. Largely it depends on genetics. So you have to really, some people who aren't gifted with certain genetics have to push themselves a little bit harder. And you know, I'm one of those people. I will gain in certain areas quite quickly, but then other areas, like, I really have to push to gain that muscle definition there. And when it comes to, you know, say you get to the point where you're like, I've got the muscle there, but I want to get more defined, that's when you just go on a little bit of what's called a mini cut and lose a bit of body fat so you can see the muscle a bit more. Basically, you hold yourself back if you're just focusing on like toning and not focusing on muscle. Getting into the specifics, there is something that I've called the rep range continuum, because you can overlap things, you can vary things. It's just important that you pick the right sort of range. So how many reps do I need to do? We're going to stay on this page for a bit, so I'm going to move my camera down here. Oops. So with the rep range continuum, a lot of people go, how many reps do I do? If you're looking at maximal strength or you're looking at powerlifting, 1 to 3 reps. That's what we're typically looking at. But on top of that, more of a strength development focus will require more like a 3 to 5 rep range. So we start a lot of our people on a 3 to 5 rep range, and the 4-week intro program in Strong Society will find your 3 to 5 rep max, because that's what we do with our clients. We found it really useful to gather data from that. Next, we've got a strength muscle gain crossover of 6 to 10 reps. This is particularly good for your secondary exercises, so the ones that support your main lifts. So you're still using, it's still compound movement, but 6 to 10 works really well for that. For a lot of people, we use like a 6 to 8 or 6 to 10 rep range for pretty much everything, and that's if they're like newer to training, or they want more of a general strength increase, or they've had some health conditions and they're working back to get into a stronger state. So different rep ranges are suitable for different people as well. Different programs are suited to different people depending on their circumstances. 8 to 12 is a standard muscle development range. You've probably heard that a lot when people say, like, you know, I'm doing 3 sets of 10. I would say you don't have to strictly stay at 10, because that's not the magic number. It's just that it's between 8 and 12, so people stick to it. So you could do like 2 to 4 sets of 8 to 12 reps. Next, 10 to 15 is higher volume muscle gain range. So it's not that you suddenly stop gaining muscle once you get past the standard range. It's just that for some exercises 15 is a bit much, but for others, like especially when you're using a machine or it's a smaller muscle group, 10 to 15 is great, because you can work on getting a few sets of 15 under your belt before you go back up and drop down to 8 reps, because sometimes it's just not that linear and you can't just add weight and keep carrying on. You have to play around with your rep range a little bit more. And then there's 12 to 20. You might use this for smaller muscle groups or unilateral exercises. So sometimes if you're really struggling developing your like lateral raise, we'll be like, okay, let's up the reps. Or like smaller muscle groups in your back, or so the unilateral exercises, if you do 12 to 20 total reps, that equals 6 to 10 on each side. And then when it comes to timed exercises, a lot of people make this mistake, and it ends up being weighted cardio, which is fine if you're using it for conditioning, or you just want a cardio with weights element to your workout finisher. Do it, great, do it for time. You can do a little circuit and then that's your cardio, but just don't expect that to get you the same results as everything else on this spectrum, because it won't. That's not the point, that's not what it's for. And that's why a lot of fitness classes that promise strengthening and toning, and they're actually timed, it just doesn't make sense. That's your cardio. So as you can see in the middle here, we've got, this is your strength range. Here, your more muscle gain. That are going towards this end, it's more fitness. So I've mentioned it already briefly. Different types of training for different outcomes. Strength specific, so when you're training for strength, you're using a heavier weight, which is going to be a higher percentage of your potential 1 rep max. You can work this out even if you don't know your 1 rep max. You just need like a 3 to 5 rep max and use a calculator. Low to moderate reps lead to better strength potential, and normally exercise specific. So you do a deadlift, it's a compound lift, and you'd max out on your deadlift. So this is why it's a bit strange when people do like a 1 rep max on something like a leg press or a hip thrust, because it's not as much of a compound lift as your main compound lift. Like it's still a compound exercise, but you're not using as much, which is why you don't typically see competitions being like, oh, we're going to do a 1 rep max leg press. Like there's a reason that there's certain exercises that are tested in competition. And then if you want more of a hypertrophy response, which is training for muscle gain, some people will say hypertrophy instead of hypertrophy. I ended up being taught to say it like hypertrophy when I studied my PT courses, so that's what I carried on saying. Use a medium to heavy weight, so it's like a more of a moderate percentage of your potential 1 rep max, and this is important that it's still challenging enough. So you do a moderate to high rep range, leading to more muscle growth response. So you can still get stronger, but it's just not as strong as challenging strength specifically. So this is like for a broader range of exercises. So you could do something like a Romanian deadlift, which is better for glute growth. So some people get these confused as well, and they're like, oh my god, these deadlifts aren't growing my glutes. It's like, that's because the weight is distributed between multiple muscle groups. It's not hitting the posterior chain as much as just doing a Romanian deadlift on its own. It's different. So if you want to target a certain area for growth, you should be quite careful with your exercise selection and not just be like, oh, I'll just do some, back squats to grow my glutes. And it's like, it doesn't quite work like that. You need more targeted exercises in that instance. So which one do you go for? There is actually an overlap, and it's what we use with most of our clients. So strength and muscle gain overlap. You can do both. You just have to be sensible with your exercise selection, your training intensity, and overall program design. So most of our clients do this. Some have more of a focus towards one or the other. That's fine. It just depends what you want to do. So we might have people in a training block who are just focusing on muscle gain, and they might do some main compound lifts, but they're predominantly focused on muscle gain for the rest of their program. And then there are other people who are focusing much more on strength, and then they might have further down the line they'll have a training block where they do more of a hypertrophy block. Some people do separate things, slightly separate focuses, but most of the time we get people to do their strength-based stuff and then their muscle gain stuff in the same workout. So strength, it's a compound focus. For example, in a workout you might do back squats, you might do 3 sets of 4 reps with a challenging weight and take 2 to 3 minutes rest. And this is why some people look at strength training and go, oh, this is fine, because they sit down. So it's quite like low intensity. It's like, that's because you need to sit down. If you're actually challenging yourself enough, you need to sit down in between and have a little rest. It's not because it's easy, it's because it's hard and you need that rest. So if you want a hypertrophy element, you still want quality movement, it's really important. So this might look like a leg press for 3 sets of 10 reps with a challenging weight and 1 to 2 minutes rest. A big mistake that we see a lot is people jumping straight into the next set with strength and hypertrophy. They jump straight into the next set and they really struggle, and it's like, because you haven't waited a minute. That's it. That's literally it most of the time. And then there's general fitness. So you've got much more of a broad range of options. You can do anything you want. For example, you can do some dumbbell squats, 30-second intervals, lightweight, little rest, because it's challenging the cardiovascular system more than anything else. So talking about general fitness, what about cardio? There is actually a huge overlap here as well, and people don't even realise it. So you can absolutely add more cardio into your weekly schedule, but people who lift weights also improve their cardiovascular health because all energy systems are working. It's not like one completely switches off when the other one works. It's just that there's different levels of priority. But if you're thinking about your entire gym session, are you just standing there and just do a lift and then that's it? Like one singular lift and that's it. And then do another lift and that's it. Probably not, unless you're very close to your powerlifting competition. You're working multiple muscle groups at once because you're doing quite a lot, and like I said before, you can pair things together at the end and get more of a fitness component. But if you're starting with your strength element, you're getting your muscle gain exercises, and then overall you are improving your fitness level. It's why people get out of breath after doing some heavy squats. It's not like it doesn't work. It's not like it's not switching off everything else. It's just prioritizing certain things. So you can do specific cardio sessions outside of your workouts, or you can do finishes like that's like a circuit. Typically, what we recommend is more walking and daily activity, because if you haven't got a lot of time to work out, I wouldn't say you should just spend a session on a treadmill. If you don't have time, if you only have time to do 2 workouts a week, 2 weight training workouts, I would absolutely prioritize weights in those sessions, get as much as you can done there, and then for the rest of the time you're increasing just daily activity, basic things, walking around. If you're not seeing progress, you need to bear these things in mind. You can't get toned without building some muscle. A lot of people are accidentally working towards general fitness and go, oh, it's not working. It's because you're not doing quite the right thing, and you're using the same weights every week. That won't help you improve. You won't keep adapting and developing that way. Some common mistakes, and it's just because these approaches aren't very beneficial. Some people have a dedicated leg day, but you only really need that if you train multiple times a week. So for people training once or twice, it's not worth it. Same goes for having a dedicated arm and glute day. It's only really needed if you're training almost every day, that you really look at those isolation exercises for the entire session. Again, it's not really needed. Circuit style. It's not strength or muscle focused. This is where like it's a timed circuit. Not like a superset or a triset or something like that where multiple exercises are together. But it's good for cardiovascular health. So this is fine for general fitness, but just don't expect it to get the same results. You might still get the same results initially, but this will slow down, and it's because you get something called newbie gains when you start doing something different, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm getting some muscle definition here, and then it'll rapidly slow down. It just takes a lot longer to keep things going, and if you just switch your workout focus a little bit, you'll keep gaining momentum quicker. Workout splits. So depending how often you work out each week, if you do 1 to 2 days, this is obviously great for busy people to hit all major muscle groups. Every single week, do full body. If you're doing 3 to 4 days a week, this is great for better recovery between sessions, especially if you're training consecutive days. If you do upper lower, so like your lower body one day, upper body another day. If you're training 5 to 6 days a week, this is great for people who have lots of time to train or very specific goals. This is more specialised. It might vary depending on what your goal is, whether it's more of a strength focus or hypertrophy focus. But we have people compete in powerlifting and strongman, and they do it 4 days a week, just to put it in perspective. Typically 3-day-a-week training programs can be full body or upper lower over the course of 2 weeks. So I will say that as well. If you need more time between training the same muscle groups, you can do week 1 is like upper, lower, upper, and then week 2 is lower, upper, lower. So that's if you know you're going to get you 3 sessions a week in every week. You can do that over the course of 2 weeks if you prefer. Next, the role of diet is really important in fitness goals. So if you want to look at weight loss, you need more energy usage and less energy intake. So this is actually suited to a hypertrophy training program, and people might not think that because they're like, well, why am I doing a muscle gain program? And it's because it includes so much volume. It has so many sets and reps in compared to a strength-based program. If you want to maintain your weight, this is really good for more strength training, but it's about having a balanced energy usage and intake. So like I said, great for strength training and body recomposition. So sometimes people can change their muscle mass and fat loss without necessarily being in that much of a deficit. And then for muscle gain, you do need more energy. You consume more food, and you have less output. So this is where, like, if you're really active, if you go to the gym, do your weight training, and say you run as well, you need a lot more calories than you think. So this is best for muscle gain potential. I would say that most people should start around maintenance, unless you know that you need to lose quite a bit of weight and you want to lose it quicker. Because if you start on maintenance and you start on a brand new training program, you're going to see a difference anyway. So you may as well not be super restrictive. But I have a video on YouTube about this anyway. This is how diet can change everything. So as well as NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is basically just day-to-day activity, there's different ways you can take things. So like person A is in a weight loss focus. This person is eating in a calorie deficit and being more mindful about the eating habits, and they're also more active on a day-to-day basis. Person B has a muscle gain focus. This person is eating in a calorie surplus, increasing their intake by adding an extra snack, for instance. But these people can do the same program. They can do the exact same program, obviously, like I said before, suitable weights depending on their potential, their strength potential, but they can actually run the same program and see separate results because it depends on your diet. So, four things to consider. Number one, your focus. Make sure your training matches your fitness goals. Number two, progress. Keep increasing intensity for your training block. So things like reps, weights used, and your sets. Number three, recovery. Adequate, good quality sleep is highly underutilized. So many people try and like add in more supplements and God knows what else. Sleep is so important and so valuable if you can get more sleep. Track. Number four, track. Keep an eye on what you're doing and your consistency, because a lot of the time people go, say you've got everything else sorted, you're doing the right thing, you are increasing the intensity, you are looking at recovery, and you're like, oh, it's not working. Something's going on there that you do need to change. And that's why you should keep an eye on what you're doing. Lesson 3, fundamental movement patterns. So let's go into the exercises. We like to look at movement over muscles because focusing on including all movement patterns will allow you to hit all the muscle groups and teach you, why have I put above? Teach you better quality movement. And this is a really common thing when someone gets into training, or if they've been in training for a while, they're like, what does this exercise do? Which muscle does it work? And it's like a lot of the time, if you're doing something like more compound, it's not just one muscle anyway. So we want to look at your movement quality rather than just focusing on the one muscle that you're thinking of. But saying that, if someone's confused by a movement and really not feeling it in the right places, that's where you can look into being like, okay, you need to feel it in your back right here, but it's not that other things aren't working at all, it's just that we want it to work here a little bit more. But the same things happens when people go like, I want to train my glutes specifically, and they're like, oh, I need, like, I'm trying to feel it in my glutes, but it's like, if you get the movement right, you will feel it in your glutes. And just to cover, what about bodyweight exercises? So with bodyweight exercises, strictly speaking, they're typically more for a fitness response. You're not going to get a ton of difference in terms of body composition with bodyweight exercises, unless you're looking at more advanced movements like calisthenics style stuff, like pull-ups, dips, things like that, because it's your upper body. Your upper body isn't used to taking that much weight all the time. But say you're doing loads of bodyweight squats, like air squats, you're not going to get a lot of stimulus there, not compared to doing something like a goblet squat or a leg press. So it's just something to consider. You can make things more challenging by doing things like a split squat, but even then, eventually you will need some weight. You can't just keep doing the same bodyweight exercises over and over again and expecting results. unless it is very calisthenics focused, and calisthenics is much more upper body anyway. So this is covering all the different movements. So first off, a squat, also a knee bend. A squat was actually originally called a deep knee bend. There's the things like your back squat, goblet squat, leg press, etc. It's a multi-joint lower body movement centered around knee flexion and extension, and that just means like knee flexion, extension, meaning it's predominantly a quad exercise. So a lot of people go, I do squats to grow my glutes. It is predominantly a quad exercise. So starting with machines, I would suggest starting with machines, and or dumbbell variations, and then progress into barbell lifts. I would never get someone doing a back squat when they're not used to squatting with a weight. Doesn't work very well. For bodyweight options, focusing on maximum range of motion and a slow and controlled movement. If you want to work on your squat at home, I would look at real control over the movement and getting as low as possible. If you're just going up and down in a squat and trying to practice your movement, it's not going to work very well. Common questions. How low do I need to go in a squat? For strength, I would say aim for parallel or just below. But for a hypertrophy response, you should aim for as low as possible to get more knee flexion, while still maintaining tension throughout and not just dropping into the squat. Can my knees go over my toes? Yes. Far too many people limit their squat potential because they're worried about their knees going over their toes. This does not cause injury. The amount of videos I see of a fitness class where everyone's doing these really, I will say, poor quality, because it's a disadvantage to them. It's a disservice to them and what they're being taught, where everyone's doing these squats and they're worried about the knees going over the toes, so they're all doing really, really shallow squats, and it's just not worth your time. What if I can't hit depth? So sometimes it is a mobility issue, but most of the time people have a poor movement pattern that they just need to work on, or they're limited by their starting position and or stance. We see this a lot as well, and like sometimes it just takes a few weeks and people get much lower. If you've had any trauma to the hip or knee areas, this might be a little bit different for you. Next exercise, a hip hinge. So this is things like a deadlift, a Romanian deadlift, or a stiff leg deadlift. It's a movement pattern focusing on hip flexion and extension, so bending and extending the hips, bending and straightening the hips, while maintaining a relatively straight leg. And so therefore it's more posterior, so it's less quad.